Hey, what's up? It's Nico. Today I would like to talk about a new automation that I've just created a few hours ago. And this automation writes an entire book, but I wouldn't consider this a production-ready automation that you can use to write your books. This is a tutorial automation that you can use to learn how you can build these automations yourself. So this is advanced stuff. If you are not comfortable with tweaking an existing automation or even create your own, this video is absolutely not for you. This is not beginner's level anymore. But if you want to learn how you can create these automation that will eventually write all your books with just one click, then this video is for you. So let's get started. You find this tutorial automation inside the community library over here. Now inside the community library, you'll find this tutorial automation, layout and automation that writes an entire book. Now let me read this out here. This automation tutorial shows how you can lay out an automation that writes an entire book. While this tutorial automation writes only 3 chapters, you're free to expand the chain infinitely to write more. Alright, so once again, this is just a tutorial and I highly recommend tweaking the prompts, making it your own, and expanding the chain wherever you see fit. So this is difficult level. So whatever we do right now, this is not going to be easy. Again, if you just want to use an automation, wait for us to release production-ready automations where you only have to type a title and then click run. But again, your own automations will be the most powerful automations because you are in control. So I highly recommend learning this stuff. Alright, so let me finally download this automation and you can see it now over here. Now this automation has, let me see, 17 steps. So it took me 17 steps to write an automation that writes 3 chapters of a book. Let me go all the way up here and we go through all these tasks one by one. Now, if you are completely new to this, I highly recommend to check out my playlist on YouTube where you can find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 videos on automation where I already explain different concepts. So obviously I can't start all over again in every single video, but I do my best to explain what is happening here step by step. So the first block or the first task is a use content task. This use content task has one simple purpose. It copies this text, whatever I type here, and you can change it of course, into a variable that I can then use in other blocks or in other tasks. So it takes this text in the background, what is happening. It copies this text and places it in this variable. You can rename this variable, but for the sake of this demo, let's just keep a topic just like I have programmed it. Okay, so in the background we have this text now in this variable. And this is already everything that happens in this very first task. Okay, so now we have this text, whatever we type here, in this topic variable, and we can use this topic variable in our next block, for example, or in all our next blocks if we want to. So the next block is a use content block again, and I defined myself a task, a general task that I can use in all my upcoming tasks. For example, this will be copied into the task variable. And again, you can rename this, but I thought task would be appropriate here, so I named it task. And you can see now, I will come up here in a second, but you can see now that I'm using this task variable in all my prompts at the very top of any prompt. So for example, this is a prompt I'm running, but I'm adding the task at the very top. The next prompt I'm running, I'm adding the task at the very top, and so on and so forth. So what is happening here exactly is that once the first block ran, the second block will then be, and let me copy this here just for demonstration purposes. You're an Italian chef writing an ebook about, and now you have this topic variable. In reality, in the background, this will happen. It will just place my topic here. So this will be the actual content that will be added to the task variable. Not this content, but the actual content with the replaced variable. So this will be the text that will be inside the task variable. And of course, if I change this here, it will be changed here as well. So if I change my topic to how to play soccer, then it would read, you're an Italian chef writing an ebook about how to play soccer. which wouldn't make sense. You would need to alter this as well. I'm just trying to explain here the concept of these variables and what is exactly happening in the background with these variables. Now we move on to the next block. But before we do, let me quickly introduce the mode. So the mode says where you want the result of this task to be written. I only want the output or the result of this task written to the result over here, to my topic, right? You can also switch it to result and canvas. Then it will put this content not only in the variable, but also on the canvas. But I don't want this on the canvas. I want it to be only in my topic variable. Alright, the same thing here, this task, I don't want this to be on the canvas. I only want this to be in the background as guidance for AI. Alright, so now let's have a look at task number 3, which is the first prompt we are running. So once again, here is my task variable at the very top of the prompt. And then I continue with write an engaging title. Rules, format it as an H1 headline. And this time I output the result not only in the title variable, but also on the canvas as an H1 headline. So the actual prompt that is executed here, and I'm going to show this one more time. So the actual prompt is not this. So it's not task, because task is actually this, right? This would be the actual prompt, but no, it's not, because we still have this topic variable. So the actual prompt would be this. You're an Italian chef, write an ebook about how to make authentic Italian pizza dough. The writing style should be casual, write to excite one's taste buds, write an engaging title, rules, format it as an H1 headline. So this would be the full prompt that is executed. And the key here why we are using these variables is because we only have to set this chain up once, and then we can just go up here, change the title, and maybe the writing style here, because Italian chef will probably not fit for a soccer blog or whatever, and then just run the entire chain because it is programmed. We don't ever have to come here to change these things. That's the whole idea of an automation. If you only ever want to use an automation once, it doesn't make sense to create one. It's too much work. An automation is created for repetitive tasks that you have over and over again. But let's go back to task number 3. So this would be the final task that will be executed when I run task number 3. Alright, and the result will be stored in the result variable title and on the canvas. Alright, let's check out task number 4. Again, the task starts with the task variable, so it puts this task over here with the replace topic at the very top of the prompt. Then it continues, write an introduction. I can tweak this here, write an introduction following this title. Rules, don't write more than 100 words. And I output this introduction to the result variable, which is introduction in this case, and on the canvas. Alright, so now comes the next task. Again, it starts with my task definition, and then it continues, write a table of contents for 3 chapters in total, following this title and introduction. So now I'm using my task variable, my title variable, and my introduction variable, all of which have been written by now, inside this prompt. You can see that I'm just chaining my prompts together, and I'm using results from previous task in this task. So I can give AI more context and tell AI exactly what we have written so far and what it should look at. And it will write the result on the canvas and in the result variable, and the result variable is called table of contents. Alright, that was task number 5. Let's go to task number 6. Again, we have the task definition at the very top, and then I say take the first chapter headline from the table of contents. So the table of contents is here. And once again, it writes 3 chapters in total. So take the first chapter headline from the table of contents and write the introduction for this chapter. Oh, I can tweak this over here. So I remind the machine that the table of contents is inside this variable. So this full prompt, I can't replicate this anymore because the table of content is something that AI writes when running this automation. Alright, and I have some rules. First, repeat the chapter headline formatted as an H2 headline. So again, this prompt now takes the first chapter headline and it should format it as a H2 headline. Then start writing the introduction for this headline formatted as paragraphs. Don't write more than 100 words and store the result inside chapter 1 introduction. And I want you to write the result not only to the result variable, which is chapter 1 introduction, but also on the canvas. Now once again, this task takes the first chapter headline from the table of contents and writes an introduction for this chapter. Alright, let's move on to task number 7. Task number 7 is draw an image, and the prompt here is just the chapter 1 introduction that AI should have written by now. Alright? Of course, you can tweak this. For the sake of this demonstration, I just use the introduction as the prompt for the image creation. Alright, so task number 8 would be the content for chapter 1. So just as a reminder, we are inside chapter 1 and we wrote the introduction, then we draw the image, and now we need the main content that comes after the image. Once again, at the very top of my prompt is my task definition, and then I go write the main content for the following chapter headline and introduction. So remember, inside this prompt where I set the chapter 1 introduction, I tell AI to take the first chapter headline from the table of contents and write the introduction for this chapter. Rules. First, repeat the chapter headline formatted as an H2 headline, then write the introduction. So this chapter 1 introduction variable holds the headline and the introduction. Alright, and I'm using this chapter 1 headline now to write my main content. So write the main content for the following chapter headline and introduction, which are both placed inside chapter 1 introduction. Now, as I'm explaining, I know how cryptic this may all sound. And look, you will not learn this from just watching the video. You will have to put in some work and try this stuff yourself. Maybe your prompt chain will look totally different, and that's the beauty of it. There is no one way to do it right. You just have to understand the concept of storing stuff inside variables and reusing these variables inside your prompt chain. Alright, I also defined a few rules here. So I said format as paragraphs, make sure to properly transition from the introduction, and don't write more than 500 words. This is just an example. You can tweak this, of course. And store everything inside the chapter 1 content variable and write it also to the canvas. Right, next up is task number 9, which is chapter 1 conclusion. Now, chapter 1 conclusion once again starts with a task definition, and then it goes write the conclusion content for the following chapter. And here I'm using the introduction variable and I'm using the content variable, so I'm giving the machine a lot of context to look at to write the conclusion. And I say rules, format as paragraphs, make sure to properly transition from the main content, right, which I defined over here. This is the main content. It's the headline, the introduction, and the content. Remember, the headline is in the introduction variable as well. So I could be more specific and rename this variable to chapter 1 headline and introduction. That would probably be better, but I chose to just name it chapter 1 introduction. You can name it however you want. Alright, and then I say don't write more than 100 words and store all this inside the chapter 1 conclusion variable and write it to the canvas as well. Alright, and that's almost all to it, because now we are just repeating this stuff. So let me scroll up again. So this is chapter 1 introduction. So we are writing the introduction. Let me type this here. Writing the introduction. Then we are drawing an image. Then we are writing the main content. And then we are writing the conclusion. Alright, so we have 4 tasks to write a chapter. Now if you look at this task here, task number 10. Again, this is the introduction for chapter number 2. Introduction. Then we draw an image. We use the chapter 2 introduction as the prompt, so draw an image, check. Then we have another prompt that writes the content, so the main content for chapter 2. Then we have another prompt that writes the conclusion, chapter 2 conclusion, right? So it follows the same sequence over here. And then we have the same sequence one more time that writes chapter number 3. So again, we have introduction, then we have the image, then we have the main content over here, and then we have the conclusion. Now, these prompts now vary just in that they are using different variables inside the prompt. So let me give you an example. Where do we start with chapter 2? We are starting with chapter 2 over here. So what we just discussed in detail was task number 9, chapter 1 conclusion. Now it starts with task number 10, chapter 2 introduction. And now again, we are saying take the second chapter headline from the table of contents and write the introduction for this chapter. Table of contents, and we provide the table of contents, and we follow the rules. First, repeat the chapter headline formatted as H2 headline. So this is almost the exact same prompt for chapter 2 introduction that we used for chapter 1 introduction, right? Only that we are taking the first chapter headline over here, and we are taking the second chapter headline over here. And if I now scroll to chapter 3 introduction, let me scroll all the way down. It says take the third chapter headline. All right. So these prompts are almost identical. They just change a bit. And of course, you should have a deep look and see exactly what I'm doing here. I'm just telling you that even though it looks like there are many tasks, we are repeating a lot of stuff because I decided that each chapter should follow this sequence: introduction, then draw an image, then write the main content, and then write the conclusion. Of course, you can change this. You can design this however you want. Maybe you want to have 2 more steps, or maybe you want to bring it down to just content and draw image. So you would only have 2 tasks for a chapter. I just chose that these 4 would make sense for this tutorial. And what I want you to understand is how these things all interact together. Again, this is not easy stuff. I'm a software developer, I'm a programmer, I have been doing prompt engineering for quite some time, and this stuff is easy and feels natural to me. And I'm not saying that you should learn it. What I'm saying is, look, if you, for example, use a one-click block writer, for example, like AutoWriter, which is super simple to use, but there is not a lot of control. You are not in control of the prompts that AutoWriter uses, for example. So if 1,000 people use AutoWriter, they are using the same prompt and kind of all get the same structured blog post, right? Whereas if you set up your own automation and you define yourself how you want your blog post to be, then it will be pretty unique to you and you will be the only one who can write this way. And that's what I'm saying. If I, for example, share an automation that writes blog posts, then everyone would use this automation. That's totally fine. But that's not really unique to yourself. The only way to really write unique stuff that is really tailored to you, however you like writing, is to set up an automation yourself. No single one-click block writer will give you the freedom that an automation will do. Because basically all these one-click block writers, they have a prompt chain like this in the background. This is all they do. But now with automation, you are in control and you can set up your own blog writer or book writer or landing page writer or whatever it is that you have to do on a repetitive basis. So I recommend doing 3 things now. First, watch this video again. Second, give me feedback if this was helpful and if you need more of these videos. And number 3, try it yourself. And finally, let's run this automation and see exactly what it is doing. It probably writes the headline now, so here it is, Unleashing the Secrets of Authentic Italian Pizza Dough. Now it writes the introduction. I can't keep up with it. It already wrote the introduction and now it writes the table of contents, which is chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Now it writes the chapter 1 introduction, which is the headline as well as the introduction. And now it draws the image for the first chapter. Again, we are using the chapter 1 introduction as our prompt to draw the image. Alright, and if you're curious why this is not formatted properly as an H2 headline, formatting will be applied once the automation is finished. So at the very end of this automation, you will see all these headlines and lists and whatever properly formatted. So let's wait for the image before we continue writing the chapter 1 content. So here's an image for this chapter over here. Let's see what it does. It's writing the chapter 1 content now. Here comes the content. And after it wrote the content, it will then start writing the conclusion. So we will see this in a second. It's still writing the content. You can see this by this tiny indicator. So it finished writing the content and it's now writing the conclusion for chapter 1. This is going pretty fast. I can't keep up with it, right? Alright, so now we are inside chapter 2. Chapter 2, selecting the perfect ingredients for your Italian pizza dough. And now again it draws an image for this exact chapter. And wow, here it is. So the chapter is selecting the perfect ingredients and it drew this image, which is phenomenal. Alright, so once again, it writes the main content for the second chapter now. You can see this by the variables chapter 2 content. And once this is finished, it will then write the conclusion for chapter 2, which will happen in a second. Here it is already, chapter 2 conclusion. So we've unlocked the secrets of choosing the perfect ingredients for our Italian pizza dough. Alright, and once it's finished, like right now, it writes the... Oh, I really can't keep up. It already wrote the Chapter 3 headline introduction and drew an image. So the headline was step-by-step guide to perfecting your authentic Italian pizza dough. And here's the image of a step-by-step guide, but you know, this text, you can't read it. AI is not that sophisticated that it can actually write inside these graphics, right? But it's now writing the content here. And now it's writing the conclusion. And once it wrote the conclusion, then everything will be formatted properly. You will see this in a second. So let me scroll all the way up. This is the last task that's performing here. And you can already see we have 2,200 words in what, I don't know, 5 minutes or so. And yeah, this is pretty fast, extremely powerful. Alright, here it is, perfectly formatted. We have our headlines, we have our images. I really like this one. So selecting the perfect ingredients and it drew this image, which is using, by the way, ArtSpace AI. And yeah, it's incredible. Alright, what else do we have here? We have this image, we have our table of contents, we have 2,500 words written by this automation in just 5 minutes or so. I don't know where else can you see something as powerful as this. So once again, take your time, learn how to create an automation because this will change your content writing game forever.